Hello and welcome to GBN America with me, Patrick Christys. And today we are joined by a phenomenal, outspoken voice. It's Jimmy Sengenberger, who I'm sure a lot of our American viewers and listeners will recognise, but I'll tell you who he is anyway. He hosts the Jimmy Sengenberger show every Saturday morning, 6 till 9 p.m. on Denver's 710 KN US radio station. He's elsewhere as well, of course. You can find him on YouTube, you can find him online, you can find this guy everywhere. Jimmy, thank you very much. Welcome to the show. How are you?
Thank you, Patrick. I'm doing great here across the pond and in Mile High in the Rocky Mountains. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to be talking about a very, very serious topic today, which is the ongoing migrant crisis. I am based here in the UK, in London. We've got a migrant crisis of our own going on over here. Can you tell me a little bit about what's going on where you are? Because the numbers that I can see in front of me here are absolutely staggering.
Yeah, you have millions of people in the last few years that have been coming across the U.S. southern border from Mexico. But what's changed in the last couple of years, and especially over the last year, has been where they're coming from. It's not just from South America going on up in Mexico. It's people coming in from Africa and from Asia, from other parts of the world, who apparently are being sold this bill of goods that if they come to the United States, they'll be provided with food, medical care, and housing. And that is overburdening cities across the country, including those like Denver, Colorado, where we have a status for the city of Denver as what's called a sanctuary city, where reporting immigrants, illegal immigrants, to federal authorities at Immigration and Customs Enforcement isn't a standard practice. In fact, it's explicitly discouraged in doing that. And yet we have busloads of up to 30,000 that we have had total come in since last year to Denver from Texas and other states down at the border that have been bringing these migrants that have come through illegally. And it is really putting a strain on the infrastructure and the systems here.
So you are a place of sanctuary where people are actively discouraged from reporting illegal migrants. What kind of strain is this having? You know, what kind of cost are we talking about here financially to the state, to the people?
It has cost the city of Denver in particular, set aside any surrounding areas, 33 million American dollars so far, and they've been recouped less than half of that from the state and federal governments, which is a travesty because, of course, this is, number one, a crisis at the southern border where you have such a massive influx of people coming across illegally because it's so porous, because the security is not there. So it's a failure of the federal government. And then the reason why you have some governors, Republican governors, for example, like down in Texas, and different organizations sending these migrants to cities like Denver, or they're going to Chicago, New York City, some others, is because oftentimes they are these sanctuary cities. So there's sort of a political point that some of them are trying to prove by saying, okay, you're a sanctuary, you're welcoming these people, so have at it.
Yeah, 100%. And there are voices over here in the UK saying very similar stuff. If you elect your local member of parliament into that building that people will be able to see behind me on my screen here, and that member of parliament backs a policy that is essentially open borders, that doesn't believe in illegal immigration, then why don't you have all the illegal immigrants? And that is something that I know a lot of people over here in the UK are getting behind. Is that something that you think would make sense, despite the fact that where you are, literally, it would negatively impact you, of course?
I mean, the bottom line is you need to secure the southern border. And really, Denver needs to change its status from being a sanctuary city. But one of the big problems, too, is a political matter. For example, the recently elected mayor of Denver, Mayor Michael Johnston, has an emphasis that he's got on homelessness. We have a massive crisis of homelessness that's happening in Denver. And he said, I want to get 1,000 people off the streets that are living in encampments and tents, off the streets and into housing. And so there have been a number of long-term hotels that have been set aside in the city of Denver with the intention of providing housing for homeless people, but also for the migrant. And so there's actually an issue where his policy approach of we want to provide housing for homeless people is running up against housing for migrants. I'll give you one quick example. This is the kind of lunacy that we're dealing with right now in Colorado and across the country. You have the mayor of Denver saying, okay, I've got this facility that's currently housing these illegal immigrants, and I want to turn this hotel into a place for homeless people to be housed, so he can achieve this 1,000 homeless person goal. But what that means is he's got to kick out the migrant. Well, then in neighboring city of Aurora, the third largest city in Colorado, right bordering Denver, there's a hotel that's been housing homeless people, that's long-term hotel. And he said, we're moving illegal immigrants to this hotel, kicking out the homeless people from there so that he can house the migrants in this neighboring city without agreement with the city council in Aurora. It is just mind-boggling, and they're not figuring it out, and also struggling with the resources financially at the same time.
You know what? It is actually quite comforting to me to find out that your politicians are as stupid as our politicians when it comes to that stuff. What about the crime figures? What are we talking about? What are we talking about in terms of crime numbers? Is this having an impact? It's having a massive impact on homelessness. We've spoken about that. It's having a massive impact on the public finances. We've spoken about that. What about security?
Yeah, I mean, in the Denver metro area, we have seen skyrocketing crime. Just as an example, auto theft. I've had vehicles stolen 3 times since 2020 myself. The mayor of Denver, who I just mentioned, Mayor Johnston, had his car stolen for the second time in his life just a month ago, just as an example of the kind of property crime, let alone all the violence that we are seeing in terms of gang violence and students engaging in violent activity and so forth. So there's been a large surge in that since COVID, and also in drug-related deaths. If you look at the drug-related deaths in 2021, I think it was, we saw a surge of 70% increase in drug-related deaths and I believe it was the state of Colorado. And that is largely being driven by fentanyl, which is coming from the southern border. So yeah, it absolutely is having some impact. To what extent it's because of the illegal immigration versus other issues, I couldn't say, but it certainly fits in with some massive crime issues that we've got going on.
Yeah, I mean, it stands to reason that if people are running massive human trafficking and people smuggling rings, then they are also probably going to be very involved with the illegal drugs trade, and that when you draw that Venn diagram, there is a rather large chunk of that overlaps, and I think that's completely reasonable to expect. What about the people of Denver, though? You can all mean well initially. You can be a sanctuary city. You can say, hey, refugees welcome, illegal migrants welcome, and then you're confronted by the reality of what that looks like. Are the people of Denver starting to turn, do you think, or are they all in denial?
I think so. I think the issues that are happening with crime, with homelessness, and when you want a prioritization of the people of Colorado or the people of America in terms of public policy, and if your priority is increasingly how do you deal with these migrants when we have a homelessness crisis, just as one example, people are going to say, as they are starting to do in greater numbers, what's going on here? Focus on the crises that we have at home. But I have to tell you, with 30,000 migrants coming in since last year or so, and 7,800 coming from Texas, you had actually this week what's called the Ghost Bus bring migrants in from we're not sure where to right outside the state capital of Denver, Colorado, letting them out at the bus. So when you see these news stories and you see what's actually happening in your communities, of course it's going to resonate. And that's not even talking about the education system, where it's required that kids that are coming across the border and end up in Denver get an education here as well.
Wow, so that's clogging that up. I imagine it's having an impact on health providers as well. It's all the classics, this. A lot of the similar issues that we are seeing over here in the UK. How do we resolve this issue, you think? I mean, you've mentioned there just shutting the southern border. Are you keen on things like deportation? How does it work? Does it need regime change? Does Biden have to go?
I certainly think that that's a big part of it. You need a shift in the government. In a state like Colorado, it's a very Democratic state that's unlikely to change. Same with the city and county of Denver. When you look nationally, though, I think Biden is very vulnerable at this point, and his policies on the southern border have been inept. They have not been addressing the issue in any sort of serious way, which is why you even have some Democrats, prominent Democrats in the country, that have been speaking out about this issue, at least paying some lip service to it. But what we need at the southern border is more funding for Border Patrol, more funding for technology, get it under control down there. And then simultaneously, I do think you need to address the broader immigration issues in terms of the system in the United States, because there needs to be a better disincentive, not just down at the southern border, but broadly speaking for illegal immigration, where you say, okay, go through the legal process. Let's clean that up more so we encourage the immigrants to come here legally as opposed to illegally.
Yeah, 100%. It's amazing, this crossover. Can I just have one more quick one with you, please? What's your media like about this? We've got problems here in the UK with the way that the media is reporting illegal immigration, with the way that the media reports legal immigration in unbelievably high numbers at the moment. So what's your media class like when it comes to the issues that we've spoken about today?
It's interesting. Generally speaking, Patrick, you would see them ignore the issue as best they could or try to downplay it. But I think the crisis has become so acute that whether you're talking the national media or you're talking the state or local media, you are seeing a shift where there is a need to emphasize what's actually happening, because you can't deny it. It's gotten to that point where it is undeniable. It can't be hidden. Got to be out front. And so there is much more reportage that is exposing what's happening both at the southern border and also in our own communities. I have to say, when you look at the kind of political malfeasance and failures that you see, like the situation with the mayor of Denver and the homelessness issue versus the migrant issue, you are seeing some prominent media voices that normally sort of carry water for some of these folks being more critical in that regard. To me, that's encouraging. But the bigger question is how long it will last, especially with elections coming next year.
Yeah, it's also a question of, it's all very well and good pointing it out once the horse has bolted and once the situation has reached an acute critical mass. Where were you when people were saying this is what's going to happen? Is there any accountability there? But Jimmy, we're going to have to leave it there. Can I just ask, where can people find you? Come on, cheeky plug time. Where can people get hold of your work?
My website, jimmysengenberger.com. As I tell my audience on the radio, there's no A, I, or U in Sengenberger. It's all E's all the time. Once you know that, Sengenberger is easy. So jimmysengenberger.com, place to go. You can do everything there.
Oh, good stuff. Good to meet you. I don't think this will be the last time we talk here at GBN America. Thank you very much, Jimmy.
Thank you. I look forward to it.